What are you looking forward to? That used to be a thing in Austria around 1900. It was eventually outlawed as the emperor realized that a whole generation of his best officers and soldiers were dueling each other to death for any perceived slight to their honor. Edit. A lot of replies are talking about fencing, cheek scars, and other duel traditions of German-speaking countries. While all of that is true, it was mostly pistol duels that ended up so deadly as to affect the demographics of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Which makes sense, I guess. Dueling with sabers, rapiers, and so on were quite common, but mostly only fought until first blood was drawn or one party conceded. It's not so easy to kill someone with a blade actually. Then fashion trended towards pistol duels. Death was a more common outcome, but flintlocks are slow and unprecise. Often both parties wouldn't hit on their first shot and had several minutes between reloads to see either whether they wanted to go through with this again. Then pistols evolved faster than our customs and a revolver duel would very easily be deadly for at least one party. George Washington had the same issue. In banning duels among his troops, he was going against a major part of being a man and maintaining honor in Southern and Mid-Atlantic culture. As I read more about Washington's troop management, his efforts to ban dueling tell me just how beloved he was. He essentially struck at the very concept of honor as his men perceived it. But his men loved him so much that not only did they try to stop dueling each other, but they started fighting duels over the duel ban itself. Someone would insult Washington's honor over the duel ban, and someone in support of Washington's duel ban would duel to defend the duel ban. But wait, Washington seems to say, this is the opposite fucking thing I wanted. The Lee Lawrence duel is an interesting eyewitness account of the duel/honor/ban paradox. Probably my favorite duel of the era. Most people like living. People who are willing to literally fall on their sword are few and far between, especially at the level of comfort we have now. The ones who are willing to participate in the duel want a fair fight because they want to win on their standards, and apparently duels are quite easy to create rules for. https://www.reddit.com/r/askhistorian/comment/4w16kv/how_were_dealt_and/with_in/first comment down. Nothing is sustainable if people want to put their lives on the lines in battle. Let them. It's not like it isn't being done now anyway, illegally with gang deaths etc. You're just trying to look at it through only your perspective and then think of the limited logic and coming to the easiest conclusion. Humans are smart and the ones that came up with the rules far exceed your or my intelligence. It'll just fall out of favor again like it has in the past, but then we can all enjoy the duel, and if something is that important to someone, chances are you will think about why this person chose to die by their beliefs. Also, as Naran K said, it could be really good for our healthcare system. The type of people who are willing to die in a duel are going to be the ones who live life harder. Those people generally pay for it in the end with health problems which are a burden on all of us. So I say let them. If someone who was biologically born a male is allowed to call themselves a woman, why shouldn't a person be able to duel? Also, you got to think about the effects of the duel itself. You get in the ring with someone knowing that one of you is going to die, then you think, do I really know enough about this to die for it, and do I want to die, or do I really want to end another's life? So chances are most will be for show. Or instead of guns we can have fighting matches where people beat the shit out of each other, causing undue stress to the healthcare system as the repeated blows to the head causes brain trauma. Yes, you can. You don't have to have it on the spot. In fact, you shouldn't have it the same day, and you can get witnesses. Smarter humans have figured out very well in the past. That ridicule is deserving. You thought you knew so much that you go to the point of wanting to duel and then chicken out. That means you're a bully and were just trying to get your own way. It would be a great life lesson to them, and they may have to move in order to make a life for themselves, but whatever. On the case of feeling pressured to, if you're that goddamn stubborn, you deserve it, or they won't, because they admit they don't know as much or they don't care about is as much as you. Also, there's going to be people who become laughing stocks because they want to duel over everything, which will eventually make them chill out and stop. The dueling it out in the ring is a bad idea too. Guns make you equal and it's more a battle of will. Fists can be one-sided, and if you allow duels then someone bigger and stronger will only say want to duel and bully everyone into submission. Also you gotta think of the health system. Someone dies, it barely shows a blip. You take thousands who will now want to legally live this way and get into duels, then they get traumatic brain injury and have to be cared for over a lifetime, worst case scenario, which will cause great stress to the system. There's no danger to bystanders. We're smart enough to know how to have a duel safely, but it's not your life. If someone can say they're a woman when they were born a biological male, why not allow someone who is willing to fall on their sword? People should feel free to be themselves no matter what. We shouldn't feel the need to control others' lives so much, but rather rules that all live by. Follow the rules, do what you want. The main issue is that once dueling culture becomes prevalent, as has happened before, consent becomes very iffy. Lots of people fought duels because they felt they were obligated to do so, due to societal pressures and the general notion of honor. Is it still consent when you firmly believe you have no other choice but to accept a duel, even if you really don't want to fight it? Is it still consent when declining the duel could ruin your societal standing and reputation? There's a reason why duels were outlawed. All of them were nominally consensual, but in practice a lot of them had one party who really wanted to fight a duel, and another who felt they had to fight it and had no real option to decline. The problem is, as can be seen from when it was still practiced, it promotes attitudes that forces people into duels. It makes people begin thinking about duels as legitimate means to resolve problems over other solutions. And suddenly people will tell you to defend your honor because of something a person did that they see as a slight on your honor. Which was how duels not uncommonly happened. I sort of remember one account of a duel where one party insisted on trying again and again since they kept missing each other, musket pistols, and eventually one of them died. So it wasn't enough to just show up or even brave the duel apparently. This is the kind of madness dueling promotes. And if both adults are consenting, mentally sound and understand the risks, why would they duel in the first place? This is already allowed within regulated conditions, e.g. boxing, martial arts, and fencing. In the UK, consent is a defense to what would otherwise be an assault, up to a certain level. Properly organized sports and games is one of the categories of consent. So if you set up the Professional Dueling Association, you'd be fine. This all assumes no dying. That's where it becomes tricky, because then it can effectively be assisted suicide/euthanasia, which is a whole other moral issue. The issue of coercion, forced consent, etc. also becomes more of an issue the more likely serious harm is. I don't think I'm comfortable with either of those. TLDR, already fine to hit each other with fists or pointy sticks, but combat involving potential death has serious moral issues I'm not comfortable with. No. For the same reason dueling was such a problem in the 18th century. Whatever you say about consenting adults, the social pressure to duel will build until a person chooses between facing a duel or being financially and socially ruined. It was the original cancel culture. When someone claimed an insult, even an apology might not be enough, you would often be expected to meet that person to trade shots. Refusing to accept the challenge would get you posted. An account of your insult and your refusal to defend your own action on the dueling ground would be tacked to a post in town and widely circulated, and you would stop getting invited to parties and your business relationships would forget you existed. The result was that, right or wrong, people who happened to be very good at dueling could often get their way. Assuming duels to the death, I think it's interesting because we already often sign waivers in which we acknowledge the very real risk of death when we do things such as rock climbing or skydiving. Though typically the risk of death with activities like that are much less than the odds of dying in a duel to the death, which is 50/50. But the real difficult part is for the person doing the killing. It would be hard to justify laying no charges on someone who murdered someone else in a duel, even if the other individual expressed their consent and acknowledgement of that possible outcome. Since a duel is a highly optional event to partake in, the government would never condone it, especially as opposed to seeking traditional legal action against those who've wronged you. Essentially, the government would have to decide whether or not murder is justified if the murdered party previously expressed explicit consent, or at least acknowledgement of the possibility, of being killed. In cases such as medically assisted suicide, this is accepted, but that's a lot different than willingly putting your life on the line to fight for your honor. In conclusion, LOL, no, I think that would be a terrible idea. Of course, all this is assuming that the duels are to the death. No, for many reasons. Our healthcare system doesn't need the extra burden if they suffer injuries. Sure, they could be millionaires and pay for it themselves, but some people will complain about not having the right to duel if you're not a millionaire. This would almost certainly evolve into people fighting to the death for sport/money. Unless you have a dystopian mind, poor/homeless people fighting to the death for a shot at making it back in life isn't a positive thing. It'd be a pain to ensure it's all legit, they're both consenting, can pay for their injuries, are both mentally sane, no one is being pressured into doing it, etc. Being legal would encourage more people to do it. Even if you're of the opinion that it should be allowed, I think we can all agree that encouraging people to do it is not a good thing. If they really want to do it, they can just go deep in some random forest, and fight there. No one will stop them. There's no reason for them to want it to be legal other than getting medical assistance if they get wounded, or making sure they don't 5v1 him or things that like, but the government shouldn't have to ensure that. If people are going to continue to fight, and they are, then an opportunity to arrange a subsequent duel or arranged fight with a better chance of rule following and intervention later on is surely preferable to an immediate angry melee. Certainly, everyone prefers for participants to take it outside if a scuffle begins in a room full of people and valuables, so at least a certain amount of method is assumed in many cases. I doubt whether it would ever be part of UK law again, but I've heard that Washington state has something along these lines. I understand that most duels, in England, at least, resulted mostly in minor injuries that met the requirement of satisfaction for the parties involved. Incidentally, I learned recently that fights are tolerated in ice hockey to try to prevent seething revenge attacks, which can be far more harmful, during the game. Only if we were very cautious with it. Like a duel would have to be non-lethal, using something like dueling canes. First, to knock the cane out of your hand when seems the safest way to do so, but even then a strong wooden cane could smash fingers or cause serious trauma to the head or body. Basically, I think we should allow non-lethal duels to be shown. Just BC they'd be cool, but it would have to be more for sport than for actually solving disputes like duels used to. If you based your honor on duels, you could very well get yourself killed just trying to stand up for yourself. If you base disputes on duels, you risk letting someone strong beat you senseless just to get their way. It would be very difficult to legally allow duels unless they were outright considered a sport and all duels were actually just for the fun of it. And given how often people kill each other, that's never going to happen. Technically, it's still allowed in Germany. Student fraternities still do something similar to duels. Nowadays you won't get killed and shooting is forbidden, but they do fence with sharp swords and without helmets. It's partly used to settle a fight between two parties and partly because of tradition/fun/who got the bigger balls. I read a lot about the difficulty of verifying the legitimacy of deaths and escalating behavior. And some predicted vendettas. In reality, it is and used to be in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th century not really a thing. At least in Germany was and is the fuel highly ritualist. So you cannot just stab a guy or have to fear revenge attacks. Usually USTSRT by sending 2 or 3 letters, pick an impartial, and someone to cover your back. On top of that, each side must have a doctor to supervise the whole thing. If you're quick, the whole thing goes down in 2 weeks. But to be fair, 100 to 200 years ago you usually died in a duel and the social pressure was high. Even when it was illegal to duel. On top of that, people were petty and dueled because of every tiny bullshit or just to bully someone. Source: used to be in a fencing fraternity and had 8 of these duels. Duels used to work where governments/legal systems failed. They were either for people so wealthy that the full use of their power against each other would be disruptive to society, or so poor they lived in a town or settlement with maybe one lawman. In those cases it gets dicey. If you're in a small town or village and have 2 grown men with completely different stories about a murder, each accusing the other, with no other witnesses, what do you do? A sheriff may be able to witness and certify a duel, but asking him to be judge, jury, and executioner for a life or death case little to no evidence. That's a tall, psychologically taxing order, especially over time. And a quick way to make enemies of the people if he makes the wrong call. They had their place in history, maybe even still do in some very basic or isolated communities. And I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't pay good money to see billionaires settle disputes via pistols at dawn. But now that we have complex systems of crime scene analysis and have specialized professionals for the fields of crime solving and justice administration respectively, and they're basically everywhere, anything best settled over a duel is probably best left to the courts. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought a duel had a lot of rules to follow to make sure the fight was fair? It wouldn't make sense to have legal duel if one fighter was basically guaranteed to win. I watched a historian break down the fight between the Mountain and Oberyn Martell, Game of Thrones, and he said a duel like that would never happen. AMDY. Here are some of the rules he mentioned. The 2 opponents had to be equally skilled with the weapon of choice. They had to use the same weapon. They could hire a champion to fight for them if they were sick, injured, unable to fight, couldn't use the weapon of choice, etc. Edit: my opinion, I don't think duels should be legal because there are so many ways it could go wrong, even if both people survive. A severe concussion can screw up someone's life for years. If weapons are allowed, you could be looking at people getting infections, loss of limbs, disfigurement, damaged organs, and a lot more. The consequences could outlast the actual duel. That could be worse than whatever the consequences would be if the duel hadn't happened. Consenting adults should be able to do whatever they want as long as others aren't harmed. Dueling was a better solution than the alternative, giant brawls where multiple people would be killed or injured. Instead, the 2 parties would have to wait, get seconded, follow the rules, and only put themselves at risk. People no longer get to have giant murder brawls without legal consequences. People from pretty much every religious, ethnic, whatever background all decided they were better off with a legal system to handle disputes. All of those various societies decided their society was being harmed by murder brawls, and dueling was also harmful to their society, so they banned it. So in those places, dueling shouldn't be allowed. The consenting adults are harming that society if they duel. Now, if it's a place where giant murder brawls are still common and aren't prosecuted, then dueling should be allowed. It's the lesser of 2 evils. Duel to the death? Probably not. That would be a legal mess and would need to involve many different third-party, unrelated, unbiased organizers/notaries/event centers/referees, Leo of the sorts probably. EX, Person A and Person B are each appointed an advisor to review the consent forms and notarize the signing through a judge of sorts with no knowledge of or history with either Person A or Person B. Both parties must meet at an appointed neutral grounds accompanied by their advisor, probably built to keep anyone not involved in the duel safe, that is if an audience is allowed, but also referees and advisors, and a host of some sorts, again third party, no involvement or bias, would need to be present to set ground rules and ensure a fair duel with no cheap shots or anything of the sorts. Street Beefs on YouTube sort of does this. They host organized boxing/MMA matches for people that have some sort of beef/dispute, and they allow them to sign up and fight it out at an organized event with a referee and in a proper setting. Their earlier videos were slightly more barbaric and unorganized, but as they've grown into a brand it's become a lot more professional. This comes down the core role of a government and justice system. Should it have a role in encouraging beneficial behavior and discouraging behavior with a negative impact? Most civilized countries answer that question in the affirmative, because it leads to greater wealth, stability, comfort, and health. Obviously, allowing dueling would lead to an increased cost to society in immediate damages resulting, including health care for those injured, permanent disability resulting, loss of productivity from those at their prime age for contributing to society, those are the people likely to duel, etc. What are the benefits? Maybe some pishos do this instead of killing people who weren't into it, but that's a real small percentage. Maybe some real bad people get killed in these and discourages or decreases other violent crimes. Maybe it even discourages petty crime based upon the risk or fear of being challenged as a result thereof. However, I see less concrete benefits, and my guess is if we did a statistical analysis and a few models, not dueling would prove to have the greater benefit.